Well, hello everyone. Welcome to another Stonesaga Q&A, joined by Max and Luke, designers on the game. My name is Brendan. Thank you for being here. Hey Max, hey Luke, how's it going?
Hello.
It's good. Thanks for, we got a couple of people joining in already.
Hey.
Polyphemus and Bones and Devin. Hey, community manager Devin, thanks for doing this. And Marcus, it's great to be. We are in the last 26 hours of our Kickstarter campaign. Whoa, crazy to think that February has come and gone.
Yeah. It really did not overstay its welcome.
It's great. And oh, go ahead, Max.
Oh, I was going to say, even if it did bring us like 4 feet of snow here in the Twin Cities.
It wasn't that.
No, it was more. It was like a foot. It felt like 4 feet when I had to shovel it off the driveway.
It was hyped up quite a bit, and honestly, was fine. We were fine.
We are currently sitting at Canadian dollars 1.472 million. There it is. That's the right number. We dropped a lot. No. So our final and last stretch goal is within reach. We're so close. We're
very close.
28,000 away from hitting the last stretch goal, which is Ancient City. I we probably don't want to dive too deep into the Ancient City stretch goal because it does get into spoilery territory.
We want there to be some things to discover in the game.
Exactly. Would this be like representative of like late game content or like mid game content, somewhere in there, mid to late?
I'd call this late game content.
Yeah, well, I would say
early late game content.
Well, there's two kinds of content in Stonesaga, which is it like late game? By late game, do you mean like Epoch 3, or do you mean like a finale of Epoch 1 or Epoch 2? Because there's kind of like 3 different stages of late game content. And I think in all of those epochs, there's kind of like there's a culmination of something, usually based on like choices you made or a path that you chose to go on. But one of those possible culminations is, as you've seen, as a stretch goal, a Ancient City, something that Max and I were brainstorming. Brendan, you had sort of prompted us that what's the crazier, more interesting things that can happen in Stonesaga, and Max and I were sort of brainstorming about what are some of the logical results of the choices you made, and what are like interesting ways that like really actually change the landscape of the game. And we have some other things planned in mind that we don't need to get into, but the Ancient City was sort of the most tangible of them that we came up with.
Nice, pretty artwork on a big hex that
you get to build a whole hex.
We get overlays, we get a bunch of stuff. And hey, if you're joining us, make sure to be, if you have any questions, you can ask away. Marcus is asking, this question, if there's going to be a stretch goal past 1.5 million Canadian, there's a padlock under the city. So that there is no stretch goal underneath. Sorry to say, but 1.5 is the final stretch goal. I think if we get to 1.5, I think that counts as 16 stretch goals. I will say this.
If we hit 2 million Canadian, though.
Oh, yes. If we hit 2 million Canadian.
We hit 2 million, I think let's offer the game with Max's original illustrations.
Yeah. as an alternative. It's an alternative game mode. It actually increases difficulty.
Exclusively on Tabletop Simulator, maybe.
Exclusively on TTS. Hey, Polyphemus, thank you so much. Okay, you still didn't pledge, but you're obviously going to do it tomorrow. Oh, great. That's fantastic that you're doing it tomorrow. I know we have... I think we have like 24,000 followers on our Kickstarter page. I'm just like pulling it up here. Yeah, like 24,000. And for everyone who wouldn't have backed yesterday, within the last kind of 48-hour mark, they get an email, and then there's another email that goes out at the last 8 hours of the campaign. So we're looking forward to that. Clint is asking an interesting question. Made in Canada. This is so it is designed and developed in Canada, the US, Europe, a little bit of Australia. We had a graphic designer working on Stonesaga a year ago, and Lauren actually, I think she's the one who originally came up with the course concept of our logo. So it's designed in a lot of places and then manufactured in China. And just as a quick aside, because everyone's like, hey, why can't we manufacture games in America, Canada? And the answer to that is, for a game with many complex components, specifically plastic and specifically vacuum formed trays and miniatures, it is wildly difficult to find an American manufacturer who can even come close to the cost of a Chinese manufacturer. And then there's another asterisk: not even just come close to the cost, but also not have to outsource components. So actually, I had a conversation with someone about it was about different projects that I was looking into that's kind of primarily card based, but we also have some miniatures, and they would have to outsource our miniatures. And yes, in China, if you're aware of the Chinese manufacturing, there's multiple factories kind of all in the same area that outsource to one another, but it's not the same as an American company outsourcing to China to get the components. It's a wildly crazy thing. And we were actually just chatting about the game Earthborn Rangers before, and mad props to them. I believe, am I correct in saying that they are manufacturing in, fill in the blanks for me? Are they?
I don't remember where they're manufacturing, but no, yeah, they're not manufacturing in China, and they do have that advantage of being a card game. There's fewer types of components involved, But even when it comes to card games, I mean, like you said, Brendan, like there's so much infrastructure already in China that it's not just like, oh, this is a cheaper cost. It's that literally, I mean, it sounds really simple, but it's the fact that these different kinds of factories making different kinds of materials are literally next door from each other.
Yes.
The factory that's printing the cards is next door to the factory that's making the cardstock that they're being printed on.
Yeah. Wow. I wasn't prepared to give my little spiel on manufacturing, but that's okay.
Now, to be fair, there are other areas that are starting to develop more of that sort of interconnected sort of different types of factories next to each other. So we're definitely I think board games are moving to a place where it's more feasible to do more printing outside of China, for sure. But we're not completely there yet. Not with a game like Stonesaga, for sure.
Yeah, I know with role-playing games and book production in general, there's quite a lot of book production that's sprung up in the last few years in Eastern Europe. That's pretty competitive with the Chinese market. And you actually can do book publishing pretty much anywhere, but it becomes a question of like what your cost, what your volume is, etc.
Yeah, big stuff. Hey, so Spawns has a question here. Is there lore overlap between Mythwind and Stonesaga, or any crossover content you're thinking of in the future? So a potential different question would be, is there lore or overlap between Stars of Ikarios, Mythwind, and Stonesaga? And is there any crossover content you're thinking of in the future? So
it's kind of the Pixar question. You know? Where like these movies aren't interconnected, but they hypothetically could be happening in the same universe.
Yeah, so that's
except for Cars, right?
Well, Cars is like a dystopian future. And...
Oh, okay.
There's nothing specific in Stonesaga that draws to any of those games, and Mythwind and Ikarios. But we like and there's probably going to be some stuff in the future. I think specifically with the Cardios, but I like the idea that all of these games happen. You know, all these worlds are different planets in the same galaxy. Like that for me is fun, right? This
different stages on a timeline too.
Yeah, exactly. They could be on the same you know, planet, different kind of stages, right? And you know, Stonesaga kind of presents us with, hey, maybe there is a future game that happens in the same world of Stonesaga, but just inherits the Stonesaga lore and world. And you know, there's like remnants of these massive behemoths, but they're all just like skeletons that people have constructed homes from. I don't know, all stuff. There's a I'm just reminded. There's a like a Viking novel, kind of a quasi Viking novel. I'll look into it, but basically the whole idea is like there's all these like gods, who are these like massive beasts, and then all the gods got enslaved and then killed. But all of the remnants are around, and like the bones have like power and stuff. So people are like, you know, hunting in these different remnants. It's pretty neat. Yeah. Okay, another question here from Polyphemus. How advanced is the process of translating in French, German, Polish so far? I'm always a bit scared of the translation quality. Hey, so great question. As of now, no translation has happened because we are still actually finalizing the English version of everything. So a little bit update on like, you know, how timelines work. We're aiming for kind of end of. I'm getting what's my Q3? Where's Q3 end? We're aiming for a Q3 finish of development and design. We take all of those English files, we hand them off to our translation partners, and these are people who have spent time making translations of many different types of games. You know, so we have our Polish partners, so Galacta Games. For our German partners, we don't even have just one; we have two. So we have Board Game Circus and Frosted Games, and yeah. So and then we have our French friends at Don't Panic Games. So these people have spent a lot of time doing translations. So we hand them off all the files. At the same time we begin printing on all non-language components, and then they hand us back the files. You know, there's reviews, revisions that happen all in there, and then we print all language components together, and those get shipped to everyone. Cool. Okay, here we go. This is going to be a question for the team here. Will there be suggestions on how to play the game without using legacy elements? And what I'm inferring from this is that legacy elements are the components that people have to write on.
So I'll field this one, but I think, Max, I'd also appreciate if you chimed in as well. I'll say up front that, okay, this is like a tiny mini soapbox rant, which is legacy games were an awesome introduction to the board game genre, but I think they have co-opted a little bit the idea of persistent game effects. Because like legacy comes with the connotation that you're destroying things and permanently altering things, and the game itself is not replayable. And I think calling Stonesaga a legacy game, I think actually carries some baggage with it. That's not true. Because in Stonesaga, you're not actually destroying anything such that you can't replay the game. We give you replacements for like all the things you write on. But it's not just that, oh, now you can replace them. It's that the modified versions are intended to be played again and again as you know, not just within one campaign, but if you like start the game over, all your like past characters that you played the game with, like the idea is that when you start a new campaign, you know, when you start your first campaign, you don't have any, but when you start your second one, those characters existed in the past, you know, in the world. This is another tribe, and they have some history, some legends of the tribe, you know, of the peoples that came before them, and so they have those characters. So, you know, I'm not really answering the question directly, so much as to say, like, if the connotation is there that by legacy it's like an item you destroy and like it's just for that playthrough, Stonesaga is this sort of different third thing where like the modification of the items is intended and a part of the replayability of it, not like limiting you to a single playthrough of it.
There's a good example of this. Some of the delve cards have a space where you draw symbols on them, and the card functions whether it's full up with symbols or not. It functions differently, but it does function. With that said, it might be possible for us to provide some guidance on how to have everything on full reset if you really wanted it. I probably wouldn't put it in the game box proper. It might be more of like a web article or something. I don't think it would be that difficult to do. If you sleeve everything and you write with dry erase, you're probably
and also,
fine.
As I pointed out too, anything that you do mark up, if you want to start over, play completely clean, there's replacements for all of those things in the box, right? So, you can just start over with, all character, no previous, character legend cards, and you can take out any of the delve cards you've drawn on, replace them with blank ones, start with use one of the sheets from, for the cave wall rather than the inside of the box.
And we're also, committed to providing PDF downloads of all of those things, right? So people can, if they're concerned about writing on the actual game components, feel free to, print off, and you can sleeve those as well, however you may like. It is, interesting, right? We were chatting about this a little bit before that. I feel like, seeing is believing, as cliche as that is for Stonesaga. There's like a lot of interesting elements that are kind of like pushing some of the genres forward that really people need to kind of get their hands on the game, and we're like, there are legacy elements, but it's different than Pandemic Legacy. It's different than these games where I'm told to, tear something up or put a sticker on the board or something like this, right? It's like, there's like, I create these characters and then they become a part of my history, and it's like, I want to create these characters because then, right? And so, there's all the different ways that you can mitigate that. But the suggestion from Discord user, my suggestion, hey, if you're getting the game, I would like embrace the experience, and just like write on stuff. I actually think you'll have more. Maybe you won't have more fun, but you could have more fun. You could potentially buy the recharge pack if you're interested in reselling the game. I think you'll be fine with that. Cool. Okay. Anything else on that? I guess there is this. You could also just use pencils.
That's true as well.
Yeah. It might be a little. Depending on how,
it might have trouble taking on some components, but
Max's suggestion of using sleeves and using dry erase in the sleeves actually worked quite well.
We've done that for playtests where we just wanted to quickly whip out some characters and it worked fine. So it's definitely a solvable problem if you're dedicated enough. If you really feel you need to solve it.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Jacob Burke has the question: will the Meals and Myths expansion include additional food resource tokens for the 5th player? It looks like the campaign artwork shows 3 tokens per player. I wonder by food if they mean energy tokens.
I'm going to look at our...
let's look at the Kickstarter page.
Well, so actually, regardless of what the Kickstarter says, I think we'll have enough food tokens for everyone. But we might need more illness and injury tokens, but we actually probably don't need more energy tokens, depending on how we do the energy economy, right?
Well, TBD, yeah. And also,
TBD.
I mean, funny enough, for the cooking expansion, I don't think you need more food tokens because you're cooking the food into something else. So you end up with less food in a way, maybe. I don't know. If we need more food tokens, we'll include more food tokens.
Yeah, roots, meat, fish, etc. Yeah, exactly. I think right now, there's going to be less food on people's player boards. Yeah, because you're going to be using it in a way more, right?
Yes.
Probably.
But I think there's more than 3 of each token in the box, right?
Well, per player. So I just looked at our spread. There's like 12 fish, right? So if you're playing with 4 people and all of you have 3 fish at once, that would be the maximum number of tokens. I will say from playing this game, that's a very unlikely situation. If you have that much fish at once, you're going to have a ton of fish going bad.
It's kind of like you're playing the game wrong. not that you can play the game wrong, but
yeah, I think there's maybe a world. This is something I've been thinking about. Is maybe there's a world where there's some kind of like ×2 marker or like ×2 ×5 marker or something, just for those edge cases, because we wouldn't need to provide that many of those, and then it could just be this like, oh, did you get like 18 fish? Okay, you did. Here you go. Good luck using it all before it goes bad. But
it might be helpful with some of the later outpost building, right?
Yeah, I've been thinking about that. That there's like a few things, especially where you might assign tokens to a thing where you're like, oh, we need to gather wood to complete this challenge. So I think there's a decent possibility we'll include something to help with that. Component limitations are something we're keeping an eye on.
Yeah,
I mean,
so.
Oh, I was just going to say, I mean, there is just the classic DIY board gamer trick of you put a D6 on top of the token and turn it to show how many of that you have.
There is that, yes.
Yeah, we'll do dedicated tokens before that. Long story short, though, because the specifically because the expansions are in much earlier state of development than the core box. This is something as we dive into kind of the next round of playtesting, especially when we dive into playtesting with expansions, we'll be keeping an eye on. And the Kickstarter page is a very good representation of what's going to be in the box. But there's there might be a thing it's like, hey, you know what? We actually need one fewer of this, one more of this, right? There's going to be some of those natural balance changes that just happen over the course of development. And with the end goal in mind is, hey, we want the best experience for you. Okay, so Clint is asking, maybe I missed it, but was there a timeline or anything about when I can expect to play? I'm excited. That's great. We're happy you're excited. Timeline wise, for us, we are aiming. The aim is for an April 2024 fulfillment. What that means, and we'll be posting this official timeline afterwards. But what that means for us is that we hand off translation files. Like the game's finished, core box finished in August. Expansions kind of get wrapped up in September. Those files are being translated during August, September, October, and during those times, all of the non-language components are being manufactured, and then we enter into kind of the final mass manufacturing, and then we enter into fulfillment. And my hope, I have a personal hope to get this game out of China before Chinese New Year, 2024, and we'll see if we get there. If we do, we're gonna beat my April 2024 timeline, but that's not a promise. That's a hope. Hear that?
An aspiration.
People. That's a hope.
And Cheater's got a good question for us too. Oh yeah, here. Yeah.
I'll jump into this first, and then we'll jump down. So Marcus, don't forget to test each expansion independently as well as together. Absolutely. And the neat thing with I think how the expansions are structured and are being developed, so they are quite modular, and they won't introduced into like the game. They're not going to drastically change the experience of the game. They're really going to be, because the limiting factor in everybody's turn is energy. It's like it's an energy usage, right? So you have a set amount of energy you can use. So I say that I think the animal companions have the biggest potential to maybe upset some of that energy usage. But the cooking, it's going to be just another thing that you can do, which I don't think is going to upset the balance too much. And that's all being worked through. Okay. All right. Let's head over to Death X Cheater. Joining late here. Just a thought as I read the update about spreading out. What if animal companions were able to carry materials from hex to hex if you're spread out? Not sure if this is a mechanic.
Maybe Death Cheater should be a game designer because, Max, you want to comment on?
Well, what I was going to say is this raises two good points, and it has to do sort of with Marcus's question where we got into there as well, which is this is very much an idea we want to do because it's thematic and fun. We also don't want the game to rely on having animal companions to keep the action economy solid. So yes, and that is definitely one way that spreading out will be incentivized, but that sort of has to be icing on the cake because it's only going to be in the expansion, except for one animal companion who we've revealed, the Aurochs, will be able to help move things around a little bit, and that's in the base game.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, and that was something that we so the animals companions. It's one of the Kickstarter updates showed off more of those prototype boards for them, but they all have space on them to carry materials or food. Even the bird and the mouse, although it's like one food token or one small resource. But that was something they all have the capability of doing. And the mouse can't move on its own, but like all of them can move to at least to another hex independently where another character is. So like, yeah, you can't like be like, I'm going to dump my entire inventory on, the canine and send it to this other person who now gets all that stuff. But you can strategically be like, oh, you really need a food and a water. I don't have the energy to go move to your location, but I could send my dog to bring you a food and water.
Hey, thanks for agreeing, DeathX cheater.
Well, again, it's good thinking. It's an idea. We liked it so much we were already planning to do it. So
I hope that the community, once they get Stonesaga, enjoy the game, spend some time in the open-ended game mode. I hope that people like develop variants and like weird rule sets on BGG. Because I just think there's like so many cool systems. I'm curious if people are going to do that. Who knows? You can never like manufacture that. So, okay. Jumping back to Logan Fair. Sorry, Logan, if I mispronounced your name. If I do not back your project on Kickstarter now, will there be a possibility to purchase the game once it is finished? So, somebody asked a similar question to this on Board Game Geek. And it was a question about if I only back the core box now, will I be able to pick up your expansions in the future? Great question. Both questions actually have the same answer, and that is if you don't get the Kickstarter now, but you think you will be able to get it before we enter into the print run, I would suggest putting in $1 for the Kickstarter now, just so that you'll receive updates as to when we open the pledge manager and when like our deadline ends for a pledge manager. Right now, in my mind, the deadline ends at the end of August, but that's against subject to change. But the plan is that we run that pledge manager up until we receive our digital sample. We have it in our hand, all nice pretty photos, all that stuff. We'll confirm quantities, shipping addresses, and then we'll go. We are not planning on producing a lot of extra copies. We'll probably produce a couple percent additional copies, and that is for parts replacements and for just like posterity uses, right? If I'm giving away demoing the game, right? Reviewers, a bunch of those things. And the reason is just because our model as a company is we lean quite heavily into our community, and especially into like a community collaboration in through crowdfunding. And so people, I think crowdfunding sometimes can get a bad rap, but I would like to say that the spirit of how we approach Kickstarter is this, right? It's like this collaborative nature. Hey, we're asking questions, DeathX cheater, right? You got this great comment, right? And Max and Luke have been doing a great job, and Devin too, right? Of facilitating these conversations. And honestly, I don't know if you've filled out that feedback form yet for people who have played the TTS. If you haven't, please go do that. Devin, if you're still here, make sure to link it in the comments. If you're not, you can, I think, go back to the Kickstarter update.
Or if you haven't played the TTS too. Yeah, we put it in the latest Kickstarter update.
Yeah.
Yeah, you don't have to have played the right. TTS mod in order to do the survey. But if you have, if you've backed the game and played the TTS mod, then like definitely we really want your feedback.
And
not to say we don't want feedback from people. That sounded weird. We want everyone's feedback.
We want everyone's feedback, definitely.
Yes. And it's that stuff is so valuable to us, especially, we're not throwing out the game and completely changing things, but as Max and Luke kind of dive into kind of the remaining aspects and like moving forward, we know what areas to focus on and what to refine a little bit more clearly. And so all that to say, I'm circling back to this question about getting the game. Our hope and plan is that Stonesaga is received by the community well, that you guys like it, and then at appropriate time after we do fulfillment, that we would go back to Kickstarter for a reprint, and maybe if I'm sure there's going to be some ideas that come up over the next year or so, and so maybe there's another expansion that gets added to that, right? So the idea is like, hey, you maybe miss it out this time, we'll have an opportunity for you to get it in the future. Whew. I just like speak and I speak and okay, here we go. Someone else can answer this one. About pets, I read somewhere that each pet was associated to one specific mantle, but I read somewhere else that each mantle could refer to one pet, one bouncing, one of his to a pet balancing one of their bad stats.
I can speak to this. So regarding the first bit of information, I think probably what you read was that our hope is in the expansions is to release or to include new mantle powers, one for each probably, that gives a benefit to the animal companion mechanic. We weren't planning on necessarily associating a particular mantle with a particular animal companion. So you still have that freedom, but we were thinking that each mantle might assist or be assisted by an animal companion of any type in their own sort of way, so the mantle of the mystic might interact with their animal, have a bonus interaction with their animal companion, different than like, the mantle of like the seeker may have a different interaction. That's all that was, that we wanted to include some new powers that related specifically to animal companions. And I think, Max, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think we're also hoping to do that for the cooking expansion as well, to give each mantle something that sort of interfaces with the cooking in a way, or at least something related to cooking, like resource gathering.
Yeah. How many mantles did we have planned for that expansion? Was it
4
powers? I think those are just the powers for the new mantle that's included in there, right?
Yeah, I think so.
Maybe quick, add another stretch goal.
We'll definitely have, we are still refining all of the mantle powers though. And I think, Luke, to your point, even whether it's in the core set or the cooking expansion, I think there will be a mantle power for each mantle that will suit well to being the master chef. Already sure. The mantle of the seeker that lets you hunt animals more efficiently is great for cooking. So I think there'll be some strong natural synergies there.
Yeah. And then there was a second part to that question. We weren't. It was about the character stats. And that was just, I think, in the update about the animal companions, I had said that a good way to decide,
speaking of animals,
exactly. A good way to just sort of like, one way to think about like, because you may have multiple animal companions, is like which to assign to which person. Max, do you have the amphibious horse and I have the mouse? Or one way to help with that decision is the animals themselves have stats. And your mantle powers, your mantle boards don't have stats. Your character that you assign the mantle to has stats. And so, Max, maybe your awareness stat is rock bottom, but that mouse has a better awareness stat than you do. So that might be a good one, a good animal companion for your character to have. That's all that was related to, not a specific one-to-one. Like, again, we're not trying to like lock certain animal companions into going with certain mantles. It was more just a way that like you may decide who has what animal companion based on like what players' bad stats are and what can the animal companion help mitigate.
Hey, great answer, Luke. Sorry about the dog. I don't know if you can.
It's all right.
Aww.
Oh, she's down there. You can barely see her. Okay, we're gonna move on to. Oh, hey, that's fun. Death X Cheater loves you on BGG. Great question. I'm happy we were able to answer. And look at that. You ended up pledging because they look so awesome. Maybe that should have been our response. Like, don't worry, they're awesome.
Well, I think it's important that the
yes.
core game standalone be a solid experience, and that the expansions not take away from the core game. I think sometimes there can be a temptation to like split out too much content or split out things that are really vital to the game, and that's not our intention here.
No, we were like, I don't want to say we thought of expansions late. We've been ruminating on different ideas, but we've been heavily focused on that core box experience.
There was never a time in development when there was like a full animal companion mechanic in the core box. I think it's a good way to think about it. Like, we kind of thought like, oh, animal companions would be cool. Ugh, do we have space for that? And then you said, what about expansions? And we said, hey, Brendan, we have an idea.
Yeah, exactly. Craig, just to answer your question here, you can update, like you can pick specific add-ons in the Pledge Manager. Pledge Manager is going to go live after after Kickstarter processes the funds and we receive it. Probably mid to late March is when the Pledge Manager is going to go live, and we're going to be using BackerKit for our Pledge Manager. So, but if you're pledged, you're going to receive updates and information and emails all about that.
Right. Yeah, and that's where you can select individual items in the add-ons that are not listed in the actual tiers, because the tiers on Kickstarter are simple for a reason.
So Adam is speaking a little bit about spreading out versus staying together. Let me kind of talk through his comments first. Adam Berger mentions that he really enjoyed games which allow for exploration. They've played the first scenario on TTS, and that version gives little incentive both to split the group or to move anywhere else other than the starting tile, aside from the exploration goal. And, they mentioned that the activity level increases way too fast if spread out. Max, I know you wrote a blog post about that today.
Yeah, fresh on top of mind. Yeah. So this is something we've been thinking a lot about, and we wanted, when we did this is iterative design. We had this theme, which is that cooperation is important, and so we said, okay, so let's make there be a trade-off between spreading out and sticking together. And so, the trade-off is like, okay, spreading out gives you access to lots of different things and gets you the ability to discover more stuff more quickly, but sticking together gives you the ability to share items, and maybe your activity goes up more slowly. And it turned out, as it often does in iteration, that like the scale was really tipped towards one side, because some of the things that we kind of thought offhand, like, oh, these seem roughly of equal value, were nowhere near of equal value. And again, that is the story of game design. Looking at it, we were assessing a lot of different angles we can take to make spreading out more appealing. And one of the big ones that Luke pitched and we've been testing, we're not 100% committed to this specific route, but it's just having everybody draw a night card regardless of where they are. There are still benefits for sticking together, but the activity increase is now based on just the last night card you drew. So, again, in this sort of hypothetical route that we've tested a few times, it worked pretty well. You're not getting way more punished for being spread out. But there are still night cards that give you an incentive to stick together. Anything that has a champion test on it, it's better if you're together, because then you can say, oh, Brendan's got the high awareness. Brendan, you look for these rats that are sneaking into our camp and eating our food. But there are also some that, there are some that force
everyone to test.
Force everyone to test, exactly. So we're going to have to rebalance the night deck around that idea too, if that's the route we decide to go. Which again, we're sounding it out. Basically we found that it was just there was way too much incentive to stick together, and so now we have to figure out like which ways do we want to peel that back. But we also go ahead, Luke.
No, go ahead, Max.
I was just going to say we really like that. For instance, when characters are together, they can better share their supplies. Like especially food and water. That they can better. Oh, now I have some animal companion thoughts on the matter. That they can better. That they can better, save each other if they're injured. That they can sometimes delegate tasks at night, and it's like, oh, you do this, hard test, but you've got the good stat and you've got the item that helps you. So those are some benefits we want to keep, and we think those are good for the game.
Mhm.
But we have a lot of different levers we're pulling to try to make spreading out better. Another thing we're tinkering with in that regard is movement, especially in explored areas. We haven't exactly figured out how that plays out, but we want to do some things that, especially as you play the game, as you build up your settlement, maybe there are some buildings that reduce movement costs in areas where you have outposts if you build a certain type of building or something. So there's, Luke, what did you have to add about that? I didn't mean to.
Oh, the only thing I wanted to add that I think directly touches on their point is the terrain feature thinning.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Yes. Shelter is another thing. This is another one Luke came up with. So credit where credit is due.
That's not true. One-stop co-op shop. Well, they were
community collaboration. Community collaboration. That's happening.
Yes. Shelter was just sort of a base. Everyone in this hex has access to it if there's shelter here. And we found sort of inadvertently that if shelter is limited, only one person there can use it, or potentially, it's a 2 shelter and two characters can use it, then that forces the players to make some more interesting decisions about spreading out, where it's not that we're not necessarily like going to force players to be like, now you have to all spread out, everybody go to a different hex. But we don't want like the 4-3 character like super group all the time, as you described. It's just all hanging out in one hex. And a very easy way to do that through most of the early game is, just the like caves that you clear out, or the most basic shelter that you build in your outpost provides a limited amount of shelter. And in a lot of cases, it's probably fine if it's 2. Like I said, it's not about making sure every single player is in their own hex. It's about tamping down on that, like every player in the game being in the same hex all the time. So if it's sort of strategic groups of like 2 people here and 2 people over here, those 2 people can still work together, but you have to make some more interesting decisions, and it's not like a giant group of people all sharing all their resources, all sharing all their food. And to that point too, I mean, that also ties into the resource, sort of the terrain thinning, where we're going to try to have fewer hexes that are, hey, there's mining here and foraging and fishing. We're going to try to spread out the terrain that's associated with, like the resource gaining activities and spread that out more. So naturally, if you're like, well, we need some, stone to go, to build these structures, I have to move to a different hex because there's nothing here. This hex that has foraging, which is great for getting food, doesn't have mining. And so we have to, we're forced to move.
And just to Adam's follow-up question very quickly, we'll definitely be reevaluating any numbers. I mean, whatever activity system we choose to go with, we'll make sure that the activity accumulates at the rate we want. I think activity has been through like 10 iterations at this point. It's actually been one of the most fluid things throughout the game system. We knew we wanted it, but it's gone up in lots of different ways. So we'll definitely continue to experiment with that until we find something that fits the exact incentives we want.
Mm-hmm. So hey, Marcus is asking a question about if there's a chance a sleeve add-on will be offered for just a base plus an expansion if we decide to get only one of these 2. So maybe, and the reason why I say maybe is if we split it out, it's weird. We have never done sleeves for another campaign before. Sleeves are actually weirdly expensive from the manufacturer, which is just something I wasn't expecting. But if we were to do this, Marcus, we're actually introducing almost another item, another SKU, because the card counts are different between the expansions. And then if we are introducing another SKU, it's actually increasing the like pick and pack fee for every like all-in pledge and everyone who gets. And so it's strange. I was like, okay, I want to say yes, but I've been learning to consider all the downstream costs of saying yes here. Actually, might be like a $10,000 to $20,000 decision. And it's weird to say that, but when you're dealing with kind of the scale we are, you know, pick and pack fee where it's 50 cents an item or whatever actually isn't meaningless. And you're like, maybe we just increase shipping. So Marcus, I'm not too sure yet. I'm gonna look into it though. Sorry. Let's go with this. If all draw night cards, I assume the epoch cards, activity related action points will need to be adjusted. Yes. Yeah, we talked about big adjustment on all of those. And then Polyphemes and Timo are both asking the same question. Somebody, you know, a couple people have talked about changing the shape of the bag for each mantle. What do you think about it? Would it really make any difference? You know, Timo saying that it could be fun if they change the shape. So I'm going to say we are not changing the shape, but why are we not changing the shape? There's actually a couple reasons for this.
The simplest reason I would say is I really want to encourage players to swap mantles and try different ones. And I actually think, although it might seem at first like them having different shapes would be an encouragement to try different mantles, I actually think it might be a bit of a barrier where you get to this point where you're like, well, I know how to play this mantle's bag. I don't really want to deal with learning a new one. I'll just stick with this mantle for the campaign. So if they're a little bit more interchangeable, I think that's a big part of that. Another thing is items are going to make everybody's puzzle a little different, because once you can make a water skin or, you know, any number of other items that can carry some things for you, suddenly you have very different considerations about what you can carry efficiently. And that already will make the bags play a bit differently between characters simply because of who happens to have what.
There's also the asymmetry on the mantle powers, which, you know, I think we mentioned. I don't know if we did enough job to communicate that clearly. That there's a host of mantle powers that only certain mantles can use, and so you actually get asymmetry based off of what is available to you.
Yeah, I mean, I think, you know, to maybe Timo's point, where like the best way to do it would be that they actually hold the same amount, you know, but they're slightly different shapes. And I like that. I like that in theory, but my worry, and we've talked about this because I think it was a suggestion absolutely worth considering. I think the worry there is that, you know, because it's not a grid, it's this weird asymmetrical shape. You know, there are going to be nuances between, you know, any sort of design you pick. And, you know, we know board gamers, and it's really hard not to fall into that sort of like min-max mentality. And with a, you know, one bag being slightly different from the other, being like, I think this is, you know, slightly better. I think this mantle is therefore just objectively better. And we wanted to avoid that because we wanted people to pick their mantles based on kind of what role they wanted to play and what the powers that those mantles had looked interesting to them. It's tricky to fool around with something like inventory space. Inventory space is like, after just straight up how much energy you have, your inventory space is probably the most important stat in the game. And it was something we didn't want to inadvertently like introduce some variability to. We wanted all the players to essentially have the same inventory stat, if you will. So we have certainly considered it. You know, we'll continue to, you know, take feedback from the community for sure. But this is one we're a little bit hesitant on. I think to your point, Brendan, I think like making sure those powers are different and interesting is important.
Yeah. And then lastly, it introduces a manufacturing complication of, you know, that's where we would be adding 3 different die cuts to the board. And then each of the shapes would also have to read as bag. And it's already like, we might already adjust our current one so it reads a little bit more like a bag. So that's also would be tough. Okay, hey, you know, we've been going for 50 minutes. I'm happy with the amount that we're doing. My dog is unhappy with how long. But Max, Luke, anything else to jump in? And actually, before you do, I want to mention that I think tomorrow sometime I'm going to be posting something on BGG. I was just like an AMA So maybe, when we'll be reposting this everywhere. But if you have a question that maybe wasn't answered here, I'm going to try to make sure that myself, Max, and Luke are around for, whatever, a period of time tomorrow where we can respond to questions that you submit through BGG, and we'll be sharing that around in our socials and on Kickstarter. So stay on the lookout for that. But Luke, Max, anything else as we enter into the final hours of our campaign?
I just want to say how grateful I am that we've had such amazing support throughout this. We've got people showing up to our live streams, which is awesome, asking us great questions. We've had really amazing community engagement from the start, and we've had some, fantastic feedback from the community. So yeah, I just thank you all for helping us get this far. Let's see how much further we get in the next 24 hours.
Dude,
Yeah.
We'll get our ancient city. We'll get our ancient city.
All right.
All right. Hey,